Hello, everyone. We are extremely excited to have you join us for today's webinar at Dreamit. We have a great group of panelists lined up to share some tips and traps around forming partnerships. I think partnerships is such an interesting topic because partnerships can mean so many different things to different people, but at the end of the day, it kind of sits at the core of what we all want to do, which is build great relationships. And so I'm looking forward to getting some perspectives from each of our panelists who represent folks on the corporate larger organization side, who represent startups, and have sort of a wealth of experience in creating mutually beneficial relationships between startups and larger organizations. With that, I'd love to kind of go round robin and introduce our panelists today. I'm going to have Glenn kick things off. Glenn, could you share a little bit about yourself?
Definitely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Glenn Robertelli, Chief Operating Officer of Admetsys. So we're a medical device drug delivery platform that is extremely complex. So we have tons of partners, both on the clinical trial side, the component side, and then the pharmaceutical side. So I could offer insights from my perspectives.
Thanks, Glenn. Mohit, we'd love to learn a little bit about you and your background.
Hi, so right now I'm the manager of strategic initiatives and innovation at Penn, and part of my role is to make Penn actually more nimble and able to better partner with new companies and leverage talent from outside of Penn and working with us. So really looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Hi, Kim, who's joining us from the West Coast. Could you share a little bit about yourself?
Hi, sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Kim Kruger, and I'm a Startup Innovation Program Analyst here at PARC, which is owned by Xerox. And PARC is an R&D center, traditional labs and really cutting-edge research. But I live within the center here to monitor and engage the startup landscape on behalf of Xerox's business interests. So really looking at startups and how we can partner, form strategic relationships to further advance Xerox's business groups.
Excellent. And last but not least, Michael, could you give us a brief background?
Sure, thanks. And thanks for joining. So I run a company called SwitchPitch, and this topic is near and dear to my heart, both with my previous startups that I've had, where I've had to do business development with big companies from the startup side to grow my business, and now at SwitchPitch. And SwitchPitch, the whole purpose is to connect big companies that have innovation needs with startups that have innovative solutions. And so we have an online marketplace that big companies use to post needs for their innovation projects, and startups create profiles and then apply to those projects, and deals are done. And so we're sort of the LinkedIn for business development, and instead of individuals creating profiles, startups create SwitchPitch profiles and apply to projects.
Excellent. And I am Rinkunas. I'm the platform director here at Dreamit. I'll be serving as the moderator for today's panel. For all of you out there who are watching along real time, please feel free to use the Q&A function in Zoom to filter questions through to us, and we'll pass them along to the panelists, certainly at the end of the program, if not while we're going through some of the questions that I've prepared for the group to start the conversation here. And with that, I'd love to start by getting some of your perspectives of what does partnership mean to you? You hear a lot of things thrown around, euphemisms, biz dev, partnering, but at the end of the day, what does that really mean from your perspectives? Michael, do you want to lead us off?
Yeah, so from my perspective, we're very focused on getting deals done between big companies and startups. And so what that means to us is very, very clear. Money leaves the bank account of a large company and goes into the bank account of a startup for work done.
Great. And Glenn, you're in the thick of building a startup right now. for you, when you think about partnerships, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I think any long-term collaboration between two partners or two parties is considered a partnership. So if you're just purchasing something from another organization one time, I wouldn't consider that a partnership. But if you have a mutually beneficial arrangement that is a win-win for both parties, that's a partnership.
And Kim, from the perspective of a larger organization, how do you view partnerships?
Sure. So we have sort of three veins of partnership that have worked before for us and that we've experimented a little bit in each category. And the first is a little bit of tech transfer. So we have a startup. What they're doing is aligned with some sort of technology that we've developed, and we can go in and sort of layer our technology on top of theirs, commercialize faster, and go to market together. The second vein would be more of Xerox acting as a channel partner. So having that startup come in with something and basically complementing our solutions, fitting into our businesses nicely and getting out to a wider market. And then the third piece that's much smaller and we've had not nearly as much experience with is strategic investments. So that is another way that we work with startups.
And Mohit, you have a great background. You've been in a number of different organizations now at Penn. So what sort of perceptions do you have about partnership and what that means to you?
Yeah, very simply, I just look at it as two entities working together towards a common goal where their incentives are aligned. And if we can do that, or if that framework exists, there's usually good room for partnerships. So, building on what everyone says, it has to be a win-win, but the incentives, the key is aligning the incentives, and I think the rest falls into place.
Yeah. So, you talked...
If I could just add one other thing, and the reason I'm so clear on our definition is because we're a marketplace that's very sort of driven by real funded projects. But the thing I'll add is I see a lot of big companies that want to, partnership, but what they're really wanting are startups to build on their, platform, or they'll give them free resources or other things that are sort of soft, intangible things. And those things may or may not be useful to startups, but I don't consider, the sort of standardized programs that big companies have that you can build on get $100,000 of software for free and call that partnership is really that beneficial to startups in most cases.
Now, I think one of the things that, certainly was a red thread was this idea of having it be a win-win, having incentives aligned. How do you start those conversations to find alignment? That obviously there's a wide variety of people out there that you could choose to partner with. So how do you narrow your focus and start finding partners that can bring something to the table that you're looking for and that you conversely can offer them something in return?
Yeah, so from my perspective at Penn, and usually with a lot of startups, I find they're usually focused on their particular solution and a very specific value proposition, like whatever they've been developing. And their customer is very clearly defined. Working with a company or an organization with Penn, sometimes what gets missed is the disincentives of everyone else outside of their specific value proposition and how it affects them. So for example, if your customer is the surgeon, startups are very good at developing a very, customized, great solution for the surgeons, but sometimes what's lacking is everything else that needs to fall into place for that deal to work. And what would be really helpful is for a startup to de-risk it so focus on what they're good at, like their customer, but for everyone else that's involved in the machine, de-risk it for them and almost, understand that this solution may not be what they want, but how to consider their perspectives and minimize the amount of work that they'll have to do and the risks that they would be taking on, especially in disruption to workflows, because large institutions are heavily their workflows have been managed. That's how everyone gets measured. And if you can alleviate that concerns for everyone else, so it should make the pathway getting in a lot easier.
And Glenn, I know that Admetsys has some really fantastic partnerships that you've brokered. How have you overcome some of these concerns for the various stakeholders within an organization that might be pushing back?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to classify which domain you're talking about. So Mohit sort of gave his feedback from a clinical trial standpoint or a hospital standpoint. One of the partnerships you might be referencing is a collaboration we have with Pfizer. So as I mentioned earlier, we're a drug delivery medical device platform. And as part of our device, we've actually brokered an agreement with Pfizer where they're actually currently private labeling a approved pharmaceutical product specifically for us and for our system. So, getting a large organization like that to work with a startup is always a challenge. First and foremost, it's finding the right person or people to talk to. So, I spend a lot of time trolling LinkedIn, finding the right people to talk to, finding individuals within that organization that I might have commonalities with. Maybe we went to the same alma mater, maybe we have some mutual friends, and try to attack that issue from multiple angles. In the Pfizer. The Pfizer agreement actually came, I found the right person via LinkedIn right off the bat. She happens to be in Boston pretty often because she works with other large companies here in the Boston area. And we were able to get together for coffee pretty quickly. I was able to sell her on our idea. She really liked it. And it happened to be one of our mentors that we developed later was actually one of her good friends that she knew from growing up from within Hospira. So that helped sort of push us towards a formal contract and an actual agreement to publicly announce the partnership. It's usually something like a large organization won't do. We have another sort of budding partnership. We do have some initial contracts with another pharmaceutical company that's developing some products for us to private label. And it's been a little bit more of a challenge. We're asking them to do something that they haven't done before. So private labeling a pharmaceutical product is something they've never done before. They really believe in what we're doing, but I really have to sort of attack the problem from multiple angles and get different stakeholders on board. So that's the regulatory individuals, the legal individuals, the individuals on the marketing side, the operation side, and it's an ongoing challenge. And when I first reached out to them, I had the right point of contact, but I didn't get a response. So I reached out to a lot of other people I knew and other people that my friends knew, and that sort of helped speed the conversation along. And when I say speed, putting together an NDA took 3 months. Putting together a material transfer agreement, although it should have only taken 2 months, took 9 months. So working with a large organization sometimes isn't fast. But if you're tactful and they get sort of a benefit from what you're aiming to do, then I think you should be able to push it along.
Great.
Yeah, actually, I would add to that though. Too often I find things unnecessarily get slowed down because a lot of people want to partner on a too wide a scope. Like, for example, there's a software company that did specialized analytics that wanted to come into Penn, and they had to deal with HIPAA, patient identifying information. So one of the ways that I encourage them to de-risk the situation, so we don't even need to go to legal to get that agreement in place, is just have a translation done at Penn so all the patient identifying information is removed. Have them do the analytics, which is what their core competency is, and then give it to the clinical people that would get value from it, and then they become your internal champions if they actually see value in what you're doing. So you can proactively remove some of these barriers that are outside of the scope of whatever value you're trying to provide to whomever.
Great. And Kim, at an organization like PARC, how does someone find the right person to connect with? Is that you know, how do they navigate that very complex landscape?
Right. And I was going to say, you're looking at her. So I've been here a year, and my title and program was actually new when I joined PARC and was developed specifically for that purpose, because we knew that there was so much happening outside our organization that we needed to capture and that we could form beneficial partnerships with. So really, I came in, and this program I'm on is with the mission to find the early startups, figure out how to create value, how to add value, and be in the marketplace, in the ecosystem, establishing relationships. And so in my role, I'm both looking internally at PARC in terms of what new technologies we might get to market faster. But then it's also interesting because I'm kind of that over the horizon radar for Xerox. And so in the back of my mind, understanding what Xerox is trying to do, being able to identify partners early and go out and make the right introductions. But, you know, I'll echo my other panelists here in that it's rather complicated. It can be slow and complex for necessary and unnecessary reasons. And specifically sort of what Glenn described, it really does take an internal champion. And, you know, again, what everyone else has been saying, the more that you can kind of be prepared and really, you know, have explain clearly what you do, how you're going to add value, and how you're going to make that fit into the, you know, our business and our plans, then the better. So, yeah.
Well, I'd like to add one thing to Kim's perspective. And at SwitchPitch, we spend talking to Kim's role at a lot of perspective on what the big companies are looking for out of partnership. And Mohit has used Derisk, and that is a huge thing that we hear all the time. And his want is to de-risk. There's risk. Can they scale? Can they provide the value that they say they can provide? And so anything that startups can do to de-risk the relationship, show examples of other things that you've done, listen to what the organization needs. And I think Mohit's example of the HIPAA compliance is a perfect example of, you know, what is spend more time listening than selling is the, you know, I think is critical in partnering with big companies. Every startup's excited about what they do. We're excited about what SwitchPitch does. But you go in and just sell. The big companies, they have concerns. They want to know how it ties into their broader system. And so we really have to, number one, listen, and number two, de-risk how engaging with us is. I mean, it's going to be much safer for them to go with an enterprise solution than a startup solution. And so what we have to do is sell the value of why have a better platform, or why any startup has to sell the value of why they have a better solution than a you know, the safe of an enterprise solution.
Michael, those are all great points. I think that there's a number of things that startups need to think about before they go down a partnership path. And I'd love to hear from you and others about, you know, if you gave a startup a list of kind of the check boxes that they should, you know, have checked off before thinking about partnerships, what would some of those things be?
To me, I think that you want to have something that's referenceable, even if it's, I mean, something that is referenceable that you can say, hey, we did something similar, even if it was for free, even if it was for, you know, your friend, but we've done this in this. So have a referenceable example of something that you've done that will be meaningful to who you're pitching. But two, I think, you know, when we do the LinkedIn trolling, to find people to work with the big companies, I always search for the keyword startup in the big company people's profile, because I want to find a champion that's worked at a startup, or that it's, you know, either in their role at the big company or in a prior engagement where they can see the startup perspective. When you get a big company champion that understands the perspective, it's much easier because they get it. They get the value proposition. So do your homework in making sure that you know the background of the person that you're pitching to, so that you know, do they get your pitch as a startup or do they not? And it's going to be a little bit different of approach. And a lot of times there's a lot of entrepreneurs in big companies that see themselves as entrepreneurial and want to be seen internally as the entrepreneurial thinker. And so a lot of times those are the people that will become the champion. So I think having referenceable examples and then finding the right people that can become a startup champion internally are two of the things that you need to do before you get into the big company.
Great. And, you talked about having something to point to. And Mohit, I'll direct this question to you, but, others are happy to weigh in. So as a startup, I could push back and say, hey, I would love to have something referenceable to point to, but I'm trying to get that first pilot. I'm trying to get my foot in the door to start a relationship. From your perspective, what are you looking for from people who are very early on in the process in terms of, whether or not they're ready to talk about partnering with an organization like yours?
Yeah, so the one thing I look for, and I encourage startups to do before they even start reaching out to anyone at Penn, is have a very clear ask. Be very clear on what you want partnership to look like and what you're going to provide, and know who it's going to affect, and have a plan in place for that. That's always helpful. Now, in terms of what you can do when you don't have something referenceable, or if you don't have a previous pilot, I always say, be prepared to offer a high touch, low impact solution initially. And what I mean by that is high touch is like show up and be on site, ready to, do rapid cycles or personally manage the pilot, but keep in mind, do it in a way that doesn't involve everyone. So you almost protect the organization from your innovation, or you protect it from your pilot. So the current workflow isn't disrupted, because soon as you introduce workflow disruptions, a lot of red flags will get put up and you'll get a lot of pushback. So I would try to scale these things try to do these small, quick pilots to demonstrate your value, and then the people that you work with will become your internal champions, and they will become your advocates in getting your product into the system. So you want to build a group of allies that can, vouch for you internally as quickly as possible. So that's usually the approach that I take, and it's been marginally successful thus far.
Great. Now, Glenn, when you were engaging in discussions, what were sort of the ducks that you had to get into a row to help move things forward when you were talking with folks at Pfizer and other partners? And Glenn, I think we have you on mute.
I was just trying to avoid the background noise here. So just to build on Mohit's point is have a very precise single ask. It's always best to work within sort of their comfort zone and find something that is easily attainable for them. And I think to a certain point, depending on who the partner is on the other side of the table, you basically have to do their job for them. So if I went to Mohit and asked him, I want to do a clinical trial, in my perspective, I would say, okay, here is my protocol. Here's the 3 people within UPenn I think would be great investigators for this. And the trial, it would be fully scaled back, where it'd be only looking at the solution in one specific department in your hospital, and it wouldn't even be integrated with your IT systems. It'd be a standalone device. Just that way, from that perspective, it really makes it easy for him to know what he needs to do, because I'm sure he's getting hammered by about 150 startups in different organizations on a daily basis. And he doesn't have time to figure out what you need, how you need it, and what you want. And it's a lot easier if you actually go and you're forthcoming and say, this is what I'm trying to do. Here's all the information you need. How can we get this done?
Tim, earlier you had, talked about some of the areas where, you're looking to form partnerships with startups. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned channel partnerships, which I think is an area that can often be overlooked early on for a startup. So, from your perspective, what things are you looking for a startup to bring to the table to start a discussion in that area? Oh,
I think
You're back.
All right. So I think I caught most of your question just in terms of what we're looking for and sort of someone who might be a channel partner. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. So on that note, I would say our channel partners are probably going to be a little more mature. We do sort of have the sweet spot in terms of the size of company we're looking for, because honestly, we are, we can be a little harmful to companies that are maybe at this point in time where they're sort of two guys and a dog in a garage. So in that sense, it is a little more important for you to have maybe a little bit of revenue, some references, some things you've already done. But listening to my fellow panelists, the two things that I was sort of thinking about in terms of having a clear ask, well, that really means doing your homework and making sure you understand, again, what we're looking for. Just sort of a fun anecdotal story. I once sat down to meet with a startup and they said, great, Xerox Healthcare. So you sell printers to hospitals. No, that is not at all what Xerox Healthcare does. That was not a fun conversation. So I don't recommend that approach. And then as far as that piece goes, if you are, early and young and still just looking to kind of start those relationships, that is something that we're looking for. And again, that my role is charged with, is kind of establishing relations and then keeping those warm and getting to the point where we can partner and it will be productive for both sides. So, these early meetings where we just sort of discuss and maybe have a broader conversation, that is productive for me in my role and for Xerox. And, as those relationships are established and continue to grow, maybe they evolve to the point where we can establish a more meaningful partnership or even begin co-development or tackle any sort of issues like that. So we are interested in kind of meeting folks and getting people on our radar and then going from there.
Great. Well, I that was a great anecdote of what not to do. And, on that topic of what not to do, would love to hear some perspectives from Michael, Mohit, Glenn, of things that you've seen that have totally killed partnership conversations.
Not showing up. and not following up with basic requests. It happens all the time, and it's the fastest way to get to the bottom of the list.
And Michael, I know you see so many deals from both sides of the table. Horror story.
So I can answer it from both sides. Guys on the big company side, when they jump the gun and they think that they have something that's really ready for a partnership, but they haven't gotten the internal approval, so they present it like there's an opportunity here. I think part of the problem from the big company side is they are people too. They want to be understanding. They want to be supportive of startups, and they don't want to say no. And so a lot of times things get dragged out from the big company side where, it's another meeting, it takes another contact, it takes another something. They have more time, more money, more, everything. And so the reason that things get killed most often from what I see is that I dragged on too long and the startups can't keep up with that kind of cycle. And it largely is because the big companies didn't want to say no, not because they are bad people, but because they are empathetic to the plight of the startup, where a quick no is better than a drawn out one. And so that's from the big company side. From the startup side, I think it's exactly what Mohit said, which is the startups tend to do things, well, I shouldn't say that. I've seen in the times that they've failed, the startups tend to do things last minute or not give full attention. And that's not how it works. It works by making every client feel like they're your only client and that you are willing to work as much effort as it takes to make that effort. And if they don't feel like that, they're going to end up walking away.
Yeah, actually, if I could just add to that, one thing just to keep in mind when you're partnering with anyone is you want your partner to look like the hero. So, and to do that, you really want to pay attention on how they get measured. So whatever device that you're offering or new solution you're offering to whatever healthcare system, if that's what you're doing, pay really attention on whoever you're presenting to and whoever you want to partner with. What are their metrics on how they get measures? How is that department, evaluated in the scope of the health system, and what do they look for? And if you want them to succeed by bringing you on board. And if you can do that, you can have a very compelling case. And that's the only way there's no short circuit to that other than, paying attention to what they're saying, but more importantly, pay attention to what they do. So even if that means spend a few days in, audit them as they go through their daily workflow, all those insights, and if you translate that into a solution where they win, it'll make, again, I can't say enough how they can become your internal champions for you.
And just to add to that, I think that the way that those things don't necessarily come out in casual conversation, I think that startups have to ask, what is your mandate? What are you getting measured on? What would be a success to you in this relationship? Because I think that otherwise you're not crystal clear on what those items are.
So, I think one of the things that I hear often from startups that are looking to explore partnerships is frustration around timeline. And Michael, I think, you raised a really good point, which the timeline might be getting drug out just simply because they don't want to say no. But let's assume that they actually, that this large organization wants to engage in a partnership. Certainly, I think there's different, levels of urgency around getting a deal done. There's certainly, it's much more complex to move something through a large organization. Are there any tricks or tips that startups can do to speed up what, to them feels like a long process, and probably for most large organizations feels like they're running at lightning speed?
So what we, in working with enterprise clients is, and we're early on, and so our business model is big companies pay a monthly or annual fee to use our platform to manage their startup engagement. And so we have lots of startups in our database. They can search those startups. We overlay it with third-party data, and then big publish needs and get submissions. And so to speed it up is to potentially offer, it's a use case, it depends on a case-by-case basis, but we'll offer an exclusive in there for some period of time where we'll say, look, if you move in your industry, then we'll give you, and we're not going to charge you more for it, but we also have others that are considering it. So move quick and you get it, and move slowly and everybody gets it. And it depends on what you're selling. Not everything not everyone is motivated by exclusives, but in our case, they are.
Kim, does fear of missing out drive PARC? Are there other things that you've seen that have helped speed up the process for you?
I'm not sure I'm going to have anything that you guys are going to get too excited to hear, but it's just, you got to have your ducks in a line and kind of hurry up and wait. And the best you can do, again, is just really be prepared on your end. Keep checking in. People are busy. That's not going to be a hassle or anything like that. And just do your best to keep it moving and keep looking for status updates, because it really is going to be the internal champion on our side working through the different committees, the different layers of approval that we have to get to figure out how to make it fit and how to push the agreement forward or whatever it might be.
And is there such thing as perhaps too much checking in? What's the right balance for a startup engaging in this process to keep you informed, but to maybe not overload?
Sure. Well, you touched on it just now. If there are any updates or anything on your end, absolutely send those over. And then from there, kind of trust your judgment on what checking in looks like with a contact, whether it's, and based on kind of their pace of response and what they've been typically doing. If they're quick on email and get back to you within the day, then maybe, once a week or so and go from there.
Yeah, and if I could add a point, just from my perspective, sometimes working with a large organization is very time-consuming and difficult, but don't add to the timelines. If they respond and they need information from you, get it back to them as soon as possible. Sometimes if someone sends me something late Monday night, I'll stay up all night to get them a document back by Tuesday morning, so they could go ahead and continue those discussions. So I try never to be the roadblock or the bottleneck in the process.
And just the iron's hot. I mean, if they email you on a Monday night, I mean, chances are that it's on their mind. So the sooner you can, there's got to be something driving them emailing.
Oh, great point. Great point. Mohit, you often play the role of Sherpa at Penn Medicine. And so while, a lot of the startups are working directly with the stakeholder, they're also working with you. What's the best way to engage someone who's in your role while also working, perhaps more directly with a clinical champion?
Yeah, so working with me, I'm just going to echo what's, I think, been said almost by all the panelists, is having a clear ask and being concise with that, because for me to engage someone, and I do play the role of Sherpa, it's really helpful to know what I'm presenting. So be crystal clear on that, and then, also be aware of any new intervention or innovation that gets put in. Usually there's a group of people that are going to win with that, and there potentially could be a group of people that lose. So you want to have a story in place or how to manage that, like if it's going to manage that aspect, so we know what we're getting into and we know the right people to contact. And so I would just strongly emphasize the clear ask as well.
Excellent, excellent.
And one thing, since we have Kim on the panel, that I would do if I was trying to sell into their organizations is their role may be the interface to external innovation. So you don't want to overstep your bounds and try to go to the direct operating unit, because that's gonna piss Kim off. Doesn't hurt to ask if you could be on those conversations, so that you can at least interface directly with the operating unit, because whether it's Penn or Xerox, the people that are running those divisions have concerns, and they're conveying their concerns to the external innovation people. We just went through this with someone who I needed to talk to the person that was making the decision, because they had questions and they had concerns, and I had to be on that conversation, and there was an intermediary that I had to at least offer, would it be helpful if I could be on that call to directly address their concerns, because otherwise there's going to be a filter to what we might be able to come up with a solution that, the intermediary doesn't know. So I don't know how Kim and Mohit feel about sort of dealing with the operating units, but that would be my approach.
Right. Well, I would just say you sort of framed it appropriately there at the end in terms of the way that we can work together to approach the appropriate unit. And as far as, if you skip me and go into the business groups and think you found the right channel, regardless of how I feel pissed off or not, that's sort of more just, well, good luck to you. And, we're trying to establish a process here and kind of figure out how to get it filtered through me into the business group. So if you skip me and jump ahead and fall off the grid, well, that's too bad. And that was probably your one shot. So.
Great. Well, everything that we've covered so far has been incredibly, valuable advice, I think, for everybody on the line. And I'd love to start opening things up to everybody else to ask some questions. And so just a reminder, if you have a question, you can submit it via the Q&A function in Zoom. And I did have one question come through from the audience that was asking about examples of some of the more innovative partnerships that you've seen between startups and large organizations. So I think I'll open that up to the entire panel. Actually,
one thing I'm really curious to how the other panelists feel about this, but just speaking on potentially what can slow people down or startups down is paying too much attention on non-strategic details, like getting into IP or pricing or things that may not be important, but they just don't respond quickly, especially when the organization already have standardized agreements, and trying to use those as opposed to rewriting the wheel on that. And that has happened a few times on our end, and I felt that it unnecessarily slowed things down. Just wanted to get that out there, just if it helps anyone.
That's a great point. Why create more work when the path already exists?
Yeah, and especially when it's not critical to your value proposition. And especially because as a startup, I'm sure you want to get early wins, and the more evidence you can generate, you know, even at your customer, like at Penn, the more, you know, you want to build that army of people that are going to be supporting you. So yeah. Objective evidence works well.
Great point. Well, I don't know if folks have had a little bit of time now to think about some examples of partnerships they've seen. Michael?
Well, the most interesting partnerships that I see are non-industry, like they don't come, maybe a healthcare company finds a solution in an aerospace and defense startup. So you get these cross-industry solutions that, you know, it wasn't necessarily clear that there was a fit until the two sides talked outside of, you know, a lot of the big companies know who the players are in their vertical, but there's a lot of solutions that could tie into their fit. And I'll just give you a quick example of that we saw. Fox News needed the ability to identify the language in which a video is broadcast in, not a transcript, but just this was, you know, Spanish, this is English. And the solution came out of a government contractor startup that had developed that for the government, had no idea that there was a commercial application for it. And then the two sides got together, and then all of a sudden, this startup that had this technology realized there's a whole new industry that they could break into. And so other news organizations probably had that same need. And I love examples like that because it opens up new industries for startups. Solutions come from unexpected places for big companies. And a lot of times it could be a different approach to a problem that the big company hadn't seen before because the industry that it was addressed for had different needs.
Excellent, excellent. And I think, you know, certainly from the health side, there's probably lots of opportunities to bring in other technologies and apply them into the healthcare space as well. Another question that we had come through was about coordinating all the stakeholders. And Glenn, I'm actually going to pose this to you first, but other folks can weigh in. So, you know, when you're a startup and you're juggling a number of balls in the air, how do you manage coordinating IT, legal, the clinical side, administration, and, you know, kind of keep everything moving along with so many moving pieces?
Yeah, I think it is a challenge. So if we're talking specifically about clinical trials or certain pilots, obviously you need to get a stakeholder or a champion first. So that's where you go to the individuals that become impacted by your technology or your product first, and then you build out from there. So for us, we're focused on you know, cardiac surgeons, and inpatient endocrinologists. Those are the people we talk to first. The people from a workflow standpoint that Mohit was talking about was the nurse. That's our second point of contact. And then from there, we go down the list. We have a technology in the hospital. We focus on the IT next. And once we get out sort of that core group where our technology is going to be beneficial versus more work, we basically have to do the work for the other individuals. So for IT, we've designed our system to be based on feedback we've gotten conversations as easy for them as possible to implement. And we try to do that for all the stakeholders involved. Everybody, you know, wants to see better healthcare and wants to see, you know, new innovations come to light. But everybody has 100 things on their plate. If you can make it a little bit easier for them, where there's not a question that's going to slow down the process, it's going to make it easier for everyone involved.
Great. And another great question just came through, which was, you know, you are thinking about working with different types of partners. For example, if perhaps you're working with a technical partner, what are some of the specific considerations that you might need to make around your IP in terms of engaging with someone or a relationship? Would love to hear your thoughts, Glenn, and then certainly Kim, and since you talked about tech transfer, would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Well, I have a lot of Zoom pop-ups here. Can you repeat the question, please?
I'm sorry. So it was about if when you're engaging with someone and you're revealing IP or technical information, how do you balance being forthcoming, but also keeping your intellectual property safe?
Yeah, it's definitely a delicate balance. So we've had a lot of conversations with medical device and pharmaceutical companies, not only from the supplier side, but as a potential partner. The things that are really core to our IP, like our algorithm, some of our components that we developed in-house, we don't disclose any of that unless we really have to. And the only cases we have is when they're looking to do venture investment. And we believe they're really serious. Sometimes it's hard as a startup to determine if they're interested in collaborating with you, or is it a company doing some sort of due diligence / competitive intelligence? I think that's, it's sort of a judgment call. You never want to disclose anything that might be harmful to your
And Kim, I'd love your perspective, since you said that tech transfer is one of the areas where you're looking to partner with startups on.
Right. So unfortunately, I am not the right person to ask about that, but we do have an entire IP team here, and that's exclusively what they deal in, is figuring out how to sort of work those lines and work those arrangements. And so do know that, in a place like PARC, that those processes are established, and that is a little bit more of a set kind of system that you can run through and that we've got set up here, because, what we're doing internally hinges on IP very much so. So that exists and it happens well, but I don't have the details on that. So I'm the funnel that would pass you along to it.
Fantastic. Great. Well, it looks like we have no more questions from the audience at this point. So I wanted to first thank all of our wonderful panelists for taking the time out today to share their advice. And as we wrap things up, would like to give each of you the floor for any final thoughts that you might like to share. So Mohit, you're on my screen, so I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I guess the one parting advice I'll give is you want to be able to tell a story, and even with people that are not directly related, make this real for them. And the example I'll use is in my previous life, I was a product development engineer, and some of the people that we interface, especially with legal, they're all legal contracts to them. Like, they don't have a fundamental understanding of what you do. So it's either they work on contract A, B, C, and even our manufacturing partners. Like, it was just a set of drawings to them that they had to make parts and make sure that they were within spec. One of the things where I was really successful is when I brought these people together, and you can meet with them on their schedule, but show them what you have. Explain how this is going to change healthcare or is going to make the organization better, and how it works, because that will translate this from being to an IP attorney or an attorney in general who's working on contracts, from just a contract they have to get out the door and make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, to something that's tangible. Like, this is going to really reduce our readmission rates for our hospital. This is going to really help people. Or even with our manufacturing team, once I show them the actual surgical set and show them how the surgery happened and why it's better than the competition, it's no longer just making a part to this drawing with a tolerance that's ridiculously difficult to hold. It became something that allowed a grandparent to play with their kids again once they had the surgery. So make sure, as a startup, almost everyone on your team, it should be intimately connected to the product. And that is something that is lost with working with big products from big organizations. They send out a salesperson that one week they're selling cars, the next week they're selling copiers, and now there's selling surgical systems, and their expertise is on how to sell. But working with a startup, everyone on your team should be able to give the pitch on why this is important, how it's going to change the world, and why the health system will benefit. And don't be afraid to share that story with everyone involved, especially legal, especially the gatekeepers, because then it's just another way to move what they're doing on the top of their list, because then they'll have a sense of mission, and this will be just as important to them. I haven't met too many people that aren't interested in improving outcomes for everyone. So I have done it the old way, which is saying, just putting a hammer to them and say, hey, listen, this is your job, just get it done. And I saw how that worked out. And then I tried to engage them and show them, hey, this is what we created, and this is how it's going to really impact people's lives. And it's a world of difference. So, I've done that briefly here, and the response rate I get from all the different stakeholders and their engagement level could not be further apart. Like it's a great tool to use, and everyone on your team can share that story.
Fantastic. And I will give a shameless plug. Last week's webinar was actually on the topic of how to tell your story. So if you visit Dreamit's YouTube channel, you can get some practice in there and follow Mohit's fantastic advice. Glenn, for you, is there any other final thoughts from the startup side of thing that you'd like to share?
Yeah, just to build on what Mohit said and just look at it from a different perspective, build relationships with the individuals you're trying to work with at the different organizations. You want to be a good partner to work with that provides timely feedback and collaborate with them, and that who they want to be talking to and working with. So if you have that relationship, that's part of building that internal champion. You want to make sure that whoever's representing you within the organization is going to represent you well and want to be working with you for a long term.
Great. Michael, love to hear your words of wisdom for the folks to take away.
Yeah, so one thing that is, I think, important from a startup perspective is to go after the opportunities where there's been a priority set internally within the company to focus on the space that the startup plays in. And so we set Google alerts so that we get an alert for, let's say, enterprise innovation startup engagement. And so we'll see there'll be a press release, there'll be an article that, PARC wants to partner with innovative startups, focused on a given area. Well, then that's a great time to reach out to Kim, because she's focused on that area. Sorry, Kim. And so setting alerts to notify startups, that's an easy one. I mean, you can do that today, set up Google alerts that are relevant to an article that would indicate that a company wants to plan in your space. The other thing is, and now it's time for my shameless plug, to set up a SwitchPitch profile as a startup that's free. You set up a profile, you can put in your business development history. Big companies are searching our database daily to find partners to work with. So that's an easy one.
Great. Excellent. And we will be sure to circulate that out to all of our Dreamit current cohort and alumni that are tuned in right now. And Kim, so you have the honor of wrapping things up for us.
Sure.
Morning/afternoon, depending where you're located.
Absolutely. So I think, as you've heard throughout this hour, it is hard, it is difficult. It's going to be a hustle to establish these relationships, and absolutely take all the advice of everything you've heard here. But I also think, no existential crises. This is how it is, unfortunately. And each relationship is different, and it's going to take a different form. And all you can do is kind of work hard and see where it goes and just keep up. And, on our side, we're learning too. So we're trying to figure this out, and it will only get better. That is my hope. So keep working on it, and, we'll get there.
Excellent. Well, thank you again to all of our fantastic panelists. I really enjoyed spending the last hour with you. I hope everyone on the line learned something to take away. And yes, we know that this is a hard road to hoe. If you want to tune in next week, we're going to be talking about how you stay motivated as you're building your startup. And so more information will be coming out about that. Thanks again to everyone. And if you have any other questions, concerns, you can always email us at video@dreamit.com, and we'll follow up with you after today's webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.